and welcome to another episode of my Flosstube. My name is Jacob de Graaf. I am the owner and designer of Modern Folk Embroidery. In my previous video I asked you to send in some questions and I've gotten quite a few questions, so pour yourself a drink, get something nice to drink. I've got a nice cold beer to keep me company on this extremely hot day. It is in fact so hot that it was 35 degrees Celsius in my studio, which is about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe, and that was a bit too hot yesterday, so I decided I'll record today my episode in our living room. The first thing that I want to do before we dive into the questions is have a look at the charity event that I was running last month for India, and I am very excited to tell you the grand total, which is $3,750, and that's US dollars. And I was just really speechless when I saw the generosity and the kind messages that I got from every one of you. So thank you so much for that. It is just absolutely amazing. I managed to donate, thanks to you, to Help Patients Breathe, which is a charity that provides oxygen to all of the places that really need the oxygen tanks to help the patients with COVID related illnesses. I managed to donate $1,000 to them and give cash support to people who have lost loved ones due to COVID, and often those people are the ones that were actually making the money in a family, which means that there's suddenly a whole source of income is gone. I managed to donate, thanks to you guys as well, $550. So yeah, $3,750. I am absolutely blown away. So thank you so much for that. I have left up my Buy Me a Coffee scheme. It's purely egoistical reasons now. I am using that money from now onwards. I might do charity things in the future again, but right now I am using the money to do historical research things for my samplers. Doing the Scottish samplers research is not cheap. It costs quite a lot of money to keep buying tokens, to buy documents, which is very frustrating, and also the memberships to websites like Ancestry, British National Newspaper Archive, My Heritage, and there's a couple of other websites that I have joined. They're not cheap, so I do need to pay for those. I touched in my previous video that I was going to share Dorte's talk with you today, but the chat, I've been answering the questions already, and the chat turned out to be so long that I felt it was going to be like more than feature film length, sort of more like Lord of the Rings trilogy type thing. I didn't want to do that to you in this episode, so I have decided to only do a Q&A in this episode. So having said that, let's dive right in with the questions.
Let's get personal. I wanna get personal. Let's get really personal. Let me hear your Q&A. Let me hear your Q&A. I wanna get personal.
So the first question was asked by Sheila Casper, Diane Mitchell, Carleen Hall and Peg Page, and they were all wondering where I was born and raised and if I have any siblings. So I have one sister, we're the only two children, and I was born in a small town called Yorkshire in Friesland, but as a kid we moved to a small town called Sloten. Now this area is really gorgeous. It's got beautiful fields, open fields. There's lots of lakes in the vicinity. There is forests, and it's just beautiful during summer and winter. It's quite a magical environment. The city itself, because it is a city, it's basically a village with only 700 people, but it got medieval city rights, so it is one of the 11 cities. And it is a really gorgeous little sort of Renaissance town when you see all the buildings from that period. And yeah, I've lived there for many, many years, and I've really enjoyed it. And the photos that you're sort of seeing of the surrounding area is the area where I grew up in, and those beautiful photos were all taken by my sister. I'll link to her Flickr photo page as well in the description below. DFTBA and DS asks, how old are you? How rude. I'm just kidding. And they wonder as well, where do you get your shirts? So I am 42 years old, and this shirt is from Paris. I bought that in a little shop there. I just noticed that there's a lot of knitting fluff on my shirt as well. Oops. Wow, it's quite a bit of fluff. I'll show you my knitting in a bit, then you will know why my shirt is a bit hairy. But yeah, so I do like to purchase nice clothes from small independent shops. If you hear noises in the background, because we're a floor lower than normally, so we're a little bit closer to the street level, which is a little bit noisy, so apologies for that one. String Theory asks, what is one of your favorite childhood memories? It's a funny one. I remember my grandfather baking pancakes. Now, my grandfather passed away when I was 3 years old in 1981. And it's funny because I don't remember a lot at all from my youth, but from my very early years, but that is a memory that really sticks out. And I remember going into my grandparents' house, and they had a little kitchen on the left side when you walked in, and at least that's all I remember. And I remember him baking pancakes, and it's a very strong memory, and I think food and smells and stuff probably is something that you keep with you longer, and that's the only memory I have of him, but it is a very, very happy memory, and it is also the earliest memory that I have of anything. It's just the first sort of very vivid memory that I have. Christine Sylvester and Joanita Bosma both asked, do you have any pets? I do. I've got 2 cats. I'll put in a bit of a photo or video underneath this. One of them is called Neko. She's quite a big cat. She's always hungry, it seems. And the other one is Mira, and Mira is extremely nervous, so I don't know if I actually will be able to catch any good photos of her, as she loves to run away when there's a camera in the vicinity. Adina Salmonson asks, I'm curious what your original training was. Where did your intellectual journey begin? So I studied fine arts. That's what I graduated in. I've got a bachelor's in that. So yeah, that's properly my fine art training is what I really studied at university. And I think if you're talking about an intellectual journey, I think it is really like everyone else's, but I think if you have an open mind to just be open about taking things in, learning things, and being really eager to learn stuff, then I think especially when you're young, you just suck up stuff quite easily and it just sticks. And I've always been very curious in lots of different things, so I think that's been a big help, that I've always had an interest in lots of different techniques, and yeah, so that does help. So I think that was something that really sort of stuck with me. Di N asks me, besides running the incredible Modern Folk embroidery, well, thank you, Di, stitching and designing patterns, what were some of the things you did to keep happy and calm during the long COVID situation? One of the things I actually did was not completely switch off, but I drastically reduced my news consumption. So instead of waking up and immediately reading headlines and doing a lot of sort of news research, I found that you can quickly spiral into a constantly checking all of the channels, checking Twitter, checking all of the feeds and everything, and it's quite bad for your mental health. So I would say that's something that I drastically reduced doing. Instead, I actually did a lot of designing and a lot of stitching, which actually kept me really calm. It was a really good thing to be able, because we didn't travel at all, so we've been stuck in this house pretty much for the whole period. And it's not been bad at all, because it's a beautiful house, it's very spacious, and it's a fantastic city to live in, Rotterdam as well. So it's not been like a bad thing. It's been quite calming in many ways, and I've been very fortunate that my job is from home anyway, so I've not been forced to sort of like artificially spend time at home. It's something that I'm quite used to, minus the traveling, which I really like doing, which we could not do, unfortunately. Renee Larsen asks, do you garden? I wish I did properly. I do a little bit. I know what I really like. I know a little bit about plants because my mother is an avid gardener. Again, the photos that you're seeing is from her garden, and it is it's a truly beautiful garden that my mum and sis have. But it's not something that, well, I don't have the time, I always tell myself, but it is actually, it's true. Gardening does take quite a bit of time, and I find that when I have time, I do slightly different things with my spare time. I'll be coming back to that a little bit later, but yes, so I'm not really a big gardener. My husband is much more into gardening, and he has really taken on our back garden to really make sure that looks nice, he's a completely new gardener. He's learning it as we go. But he seems to have really taken to it, and it's really starting to look absolutely fantastic. Ina Semerenko asks me, what is your ideal place for recharging your batteries? I don't know if I have an ideal place as of yet, as we haven't been able to do a lot of traveling yet. I do love to just sort of go for little walks. One place that I really like is just to go to the beach, and we are quite fortunate to be about half an hour from The Hague, and then it's a short ride by tram, and you're actually on a beautiful beach, which is fantastic. So that's something that I really enjoy, and for the rest, actually just being at home. I love traveling, but I'm also very much a homebody, and I really don't mind staying prolonged periods of time at home. So for me, doing nothing for a couple of days, which usually involves some crafting anyway, but that's for me properly recharging my batteries. Margaret Yoder asks, what is the furthest you have ever traveled away from your home? And why isn't Darcy stitching one of your designs? That's a really good question, Darcy. Why are you not stitching one of my designs? No, but to answer Margaret's question about the furthest I've been, that probably would be Japan. We were there about 10 years ago now. I think it was 2011 that we were there. And my husband was doing really interesting work with schools for his PhD. And it was a really intriguing experience, as we did not just do the big cities, but also the smaller towns in between to visit schools there. And it was really lovely because we didn't stay at hotels, we stayed at families and people's homes. I remember staying in a really crazy artist's house, which was fantastic. He made little sculptures of wooden chair persons, which was quite amazing. So they were half man, half chair. And it was just really, really quite spectacular to sort of see all these different places in Japan and meet all these different people. And so yeah, I feel really privileged that we have been able to do that. And I would really, really like to go back one day to Japan again. Satya Art asks, what is your favorite travel destination, and do you speak or read Japanese? So my favorite travel destination, my husband is Indian, so we try and go every year to India, of course, and it is a country really, really dear to me. As I really enjoy the Scandinavian countries to go on holidays as well. I think they're fantastic. Many years ago I was in Iceland, and that's a place that I really would want to go back to again. But yeah, there's just so many fantastic countries that I haven't even visited yet that are still on the bucket list, and I really do want to visit them. But it will all be in time, I guess. As for speaking and reading Japanese, I studied it for a year at university in York, and I'm not very good at it at all. I can sort of read and write a little bit, mainly read. Now it's nearly gone. I can say watashi wa Jacob desu, which means my name is Jacob, but that's not very helpful. XX Maries asks, I'm curious if you have any favorite places in the Netherlands. Well, like I said, The Hague and the beach at Scheveningen is a really wonderful place, but there's around the city of Rotterdam is actually a whole bunch of very old cities. So we've got Gouda, Delft, there's Dordrecht, there is the towns in Zeeland, which are fairly close by as well. Breda is very close by the train. And they're all really fantastic places. I think Delft I really, really enjoy as a beautiful old Dutch city. There's so many beautiful towns in the vicinity really here. Kate Brown asks me, I would be interested to hear your observations about the differences between living in York and Rotterdam. So it's quite a different beast, really, if you think about it. York is such a medieval city. It's like it has roots like in Roman times. It's a very, very ancient city. Then there's the Viking history, and all of the names are very Scandinavian sounding that you have. So there's a lot of streets that are called Gate, which is from Gatan, from the Nordic roots. And it's a fantastic place. There's an enormous cathedral there, and all of the streets are very narrow and old and quaint, and there's lots of Georgian houses and Victorian houses and Tudor buildings. So it is really unique to live in a place steeped in so much history. And then on the other side, we're in Rotterdam, which could not be any more different. Rotterdam city centre got completely bombed during the very first few days of World War II for the Netherlands. And because it was such an important town, it had a huge harbour, and it was an enormous blow to the country to lose such an important city. And yes, it's after the war, the city was rebuilt, and it was completely differently planned. It's a very modern city. There's beautiful modern architecture. It's very exciting. It's very vibrant. It's a very lively city. There's lots of culture. There's beautiful museums here. So in that respect, it's a fantastic place to live. You don't have that history that York has, but I jump on the train and I'm in Delft and other cities that are just as beautiful. So I think for me, one of the things that I do miss from York a lot is the fact that nature was so close by. You would jump on your bike and you're in the Yorkshire Dales or the Yorkshire Moors or wherever you want to go, a little bit trip by train, and you're at the seaside in Scarborough, which is quite spectacular as well. And that's something that we do miss. However, once we get our jobs and we can travel properly, Belgium is really close by train. Germany is quite close by train, and basically having that luxury of the super connectedness that is Rotterdam, like the big cities within Europe are all kind of a day trip by train, which is just superb. Claire Shaw asks, what was your favourite thing about Yorkshire? Like I said in the previous one, just the vicinity to nature. I really enjoyed going to Scarborough, for instance, to the seaside, which is beautiful. Paying a visit to Anne Bronte's grave, who is buried there. Or on the other side, in West Yorkshire, you've got the town where the Brontes actually grew up, which is still there. And it's looking very different than in the days of the Brontes, of course. It's much greener now and much more pleasant, but it was very bleak. But when you sort of go a couple of miles away and you actually go for walks on the moors, you can get a sense of that sort of desolate landscape that it was. It's very wild and rugged and beautiful, and yes, it is a landscape that I do miss, and it's very dear to me, and I do hope to be able to visit it soon again. Main Moose Mom Stitcher, or Michelle, asks me, you seem to have lived in a number of interesting places. Where has been your favorite place to live? It's tricky because I've not lived in that many places. I moved quite a bit. Within York, we lived in, I think, 4 different houses in total. Yeah, 4 different houses we lived in York over a period of 15 years. But the area where I grew up is super dear to me. It's a beautiful, stunning area. Then, as in my earlier adult years, I spent in York and in England. And again, that is very dear to me. And now we're living in a really beautiful part of Holland, which is also very dear to me. So I would find it very hard to make a decision to say, this is my favorite place. I don't really have a favorite place as such. Vicky Loyal asks, do you have any plans to visit the US when COVID situation allows? I'm not making any plans at the moment. I would love to make plans, but it's just all up in the air right now. And we first have to do family visits and do all of these things. We need to plan a trip to India, and we want to go for a little holiday ourselves as well. So there's lots of stuff that we want to do first. And I think we'll properly start planning stuff for 2022 when we hope things are a bit calmer and a bit more normal again. But the US is definitely on my list of places to visit. Nicole Kraus, or Cruz, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, asks, have you ever visited South Africa? I haven't. I have not been to any of the African nations yet, but we have quite a few friends from different African nations, and it is something that does intrigue me, and I would really love to visit Africa one day. As a kid, I was quite obsessed by Egypt, which is of course very northern. But yeah, I would love to see all these things for myself and visit the history and just see all these amazing things. I remember watching Masks from Benin and being really intrigued by all of that, and the beautiful history and the artisanship of the people there. It's quite extraordinary, and I would love to learn more about that as well. So who knows, I might be coming that way. Isabel Ware asks, I wonder how and when you have time to read, and if that reading is related to stitching. Well, I do have time to read, well, some time to read, but I don't read as much as I would like. I do try and read as much as I can, stitching related, of course, to learn more and to sort of delve more into the history of the subject. But I really do like fiction as well, and I like to listen to audiobooks if the books are available that I want to read. I find that fiction audiobooks is a bit more calming when stitching, because for history audiobooks you really need to focus very deeply, which is quite hard sometimes with an audiobook, while stitching and trying to count and follow a pattern. But a fiction book, you can sort of listen to it and take it all in, because it's sort of more, it's more a narrative that's easier to follow. Kelly McD asks, what are your 3 favorite books and why do you love them? What is your favorite shop in the Netherlands? And finally, where is your favorite spot to vacation? Well, the favorite holiday spot I kind of touched on earlier. And favorite shop in the Netherlands, I don't really have a favorite shop in the Netherlands. I think No, unless you're asking for craft shops. There is the Handwerk Boutique, which is run by a mother-daughter duo, and they're absolutely lovely people. I will link to that as well. If you're in Europe, definitely. I mean, they ship worldwide, but especially for Europe, I would recommend them. They're fantastic people. They are very helpful. You can always ask them for an email, for a question in an email, and they'll be able to assist you. So yeah, I think if there's a craft shop, I have not visited the shop, I've only purchased from them online, but their service is just excellent, so I can definitely recommend them. As for 3 favorite books, well, that's too hard to answer, so I've got a whole stack here. There is this one, The Awakening by Kate Chopin, which is a beautiful book about a lady who goes vacation. It's from 1899, and it was quite scandalous book actually when it was written, as it's about a woman, and she has an awakening while at the seaside on a holiday, and her husband is a very good man but a very boring man, and she kind of falls in love with a much younger man who teaches her to swim, and it's a beautiful book. The other book which I really like is The Sea by Iris Murdoch. It's a fantastic book. Again, a seaside novel. I seem to have a thing for water and sea. It seems to be a recurring motive in what I enjoy reading. It's about a elderly actor who retires to the seaside, and spooky stuff starts happening, and ghosts from the past in the form of friends from London and his youth come haunt him at the seaside, and it's a really, really fantastic title. A while ago I read Margaret Atwood's Surfacing, which is just a really beautiful atmospheric book, again set near the water. I just realized it's set in northern Quebec, and it's about the journey of a young woman to try and find her father. And it's just, I won't go into the details, but it is a beautiful, very atmospheric book, which I really enjoyed. One book, which is one of the books that I really like to give to people, and I can't find it, is a title by Thierry Fessos. I hope I pronounce his name right. Thierry Fessos. It's from 1963, and it's called The Ice Palace, or Isslottet in Norwegian. And again, it's a very atmospheric book about 2 very young girls. They become friends. One of the girls has just moved into the area where the other girl already lives. Then one day, one of the girls goes missing, and it's a very gripping book. It's very simple. It's just really stunning. It's a short book as well, but it is something you will start reading it and you will not be able to put it down until you finish the last page, and it's it is just absolutely stunning. One book which I definitely want to talk about is In Praise of Shadows. It's the name of my musical project. I named it after this book, and it's by Junichiro Tanizaki, and this is an essay actually, so it's not fiction, but it's an excellent title. He writes in it about basically it's from 1933, and he touches on the subject of electricity and lighting, and how he did not like the glare of the new electric lights in the old Japanese houses, for instance. And he said there was something to be said about a dark room, and the way he describes the Japanese architecture and the art, and how you enjoy it by candlelight, and how I remember distinctly how he describes the blackness of miso soup in a black lacquer bowl, enjoyed by candlelight in an old-fashioned tea house, is such a magical thing, because the gold sort of lights up, and the black of the lacquer is beautiful, and then you've got this dark broth, and it's all magical. And he said, like, now you have these huge electric lights, and everything looks cheap and tacky, and the chips on the little bowls are suddenly disturbing, and the miso looks gross, and it's all not good anymore. And it sort of makes you look at how we have become obsessed as well with lighting everything. You can't walk into a church anymore without every little detail being lit up, and it didn't used to be like that. There's a magic and a mystery about walking in a slightly twilighty church where the only light is coming from the sun coming through the stained glass windows or the candles burning on the altar, and that's very magical, and I think that's what he tried to get to. So that's a beautiful book. And when I talked about that, one of the people on, I think it might have been Flosstube or my Instagram perhaps, was recommending some fiction titles. I am currently reading The Key, and there was another tale, I forgot which one that was, can't remember that, but it was a very disturbing sort of story as well. They're all quite, like a lot of Japanese books, tend to be nice and concise. I've also got the Makioka Sisters, which is his magnum opus, I think. I've never read that one. I discovered today that I had another one, so I do need to read that as well. So yeah, that's a bit about my favorite books. It's quite a long answer. Sharon Scheid and Musical Stitches both asked, I'd love to know what music you enjoy. Well, cheers. I've got a very broad taste in music. I do love pop, I love classical, so there's quite a few different things I like. For instance, in pop, I really like David Bowie, Saint Vincent, Goldfrapp, Kate Bush, Björk, Radiohead. Recently I've started listening to Way Is Blood. She's a very young singer from America, and I really like her work. Patrick Watson, I find his work really quite beautiful and magical as well. I've also got a very dear friend of mine who's a very gifted cello player and singer called Caroline Lavelle, and I'm working on some stuff with her for her new album, which is very exciting. So I've done some instrumental tracks and she's written music over that. And recently she actually did a cover of a song that I wrote, which is, I'm really honored that she enjoyed the song so much that she wanted to sing it, so that was quite awesome.
There we lay in the emerald green, hand in hand we will rise, just as the sun after the night, submerged as the water rushes in overhead. Oh, and how we dance in a sea of flailing limbs. There's no defense. No, how we dance.
As for classical music, I really like very ancient old music. It's very sort of meditative to listen to that. I love Bach. I love especially the major works like the Matthew Passion. I really enjoy opera, especially Puccini. I don't like all opera, but Puccini's operas are just there's something about them that I really love. I love being pulled into the drama of the stories, and that's quite special. I really like Shostakovich, Satie, for obvious reasons. I love piano music, Debussy as well, and I quite fancy a bit of Stravinsky every once in a while. Ladybird Stitcher and Patty Miller were both asking, do you have any other creative pursuits? Yes, I do. as I said, I love making music. I recorded an album 2 years ago. I think it was, maybe, is it 3 years? No, I think it's 2 years ago. And that was called In Praise of Shadows, or that's the project name. And the title of that album is called Ivy. You can find it on Spotify. I also sell the CDs. You can get them on the In Praise of Shadows website, and that's www.inprofsh. So INPROFSH. So the first 2 letters of each word of inpraiseofshadows.com. Links are in the description below as well. Just want to warn you, if you wanted to buy the CD, if you're not in Europe Zone 1, then shipping becomes a little bit more expensive. And if you're in the rest of the world zone, seen from the Netherlands, it's fairly pricey. I think it's €11 for a CD to be shipped to those areas. But you can listen for free if you have a Spotify account. I think it's on Apple Music as well. But if you look up In Praise of Shadows and then Ivy, as in the rambling plant Ivy, you will find the album. I like knitting and crocheting. I've not done it in many years. So I'm currently just knitting a scarf, which I've just started. It's not very exciting to look at, but this is really beautiful, a very uneven linen, which drapes really nicely and makes an uneven stitch, which I like, which is a bit shabby. But I really enjoy that. And these needles are very old ones, which I'm very excited about as well. I bought them in an antique shop. They had some nice haberdashery stuff, and I saw these needles and I just wanted them. So it's quite nice to have. And I bought a whole bunch of really gorgeous linen threads, and some more here, only to discover that these Rowan threads are discontinued. So I literally got the last stock, and I was planning to make a sweater out of this, but that's not going to happen because I don't have enough stock. So that's a bit of a shame. I like crochet as well. I've started recently again, and I have a wild plan of making a granny square type of sort of throw or whatever. But as with many of those plans, they start and are never finished. Does that sound familiar? Let's see. Susan Hernandez asks, do you have a profession besides being designing cross-stitch? I don't. Well, no, I don't. If you can call being an artist a profession, I do paint and I do draw. But to be honest with you, I've not done that in quite a while. I'm really blessed that this is my full-time job, doing design and selling my patterns. So that's something that's very special to me. Teresa Cuneo asks me, did you study needle arts, or is this a hobby turned designing? No, I didn't. I taught myself. I was taught as a kid the basic stitching by my mom. Just the standard, like make sure that your crosses are the same way, stitch over 2 threads. There you go, ready to go. And I mean, that's all you need to do. Really, that's like, it's fairly simple. So, it is really a hobby that turned into a full-time job, which is quite nice. Diana Michelle B asks, did you find your perfect needle brand, and can you share what you decided upon? I haven't. I planned on buying some different needles, but I haven't yet. Some very kind people send me some needles, but I've not really found the needle that I really prefer over the Clover 2010 needle packs, which has an assortment of 6 needles, I think of 3 or 4 different sizes or something like that. It's a really nice pack. I absolutely love them, but sadly Clover has discontinued those packs. I think it's actually 8. Yeah, there's 4 different sizes, and I've really enjoyed them because even the smallest, finest needle is so small and fine, but still has a blunt tip, which is just perfect for stitching on 56 count linen. And unfortunately I've not found a replacement for that. I have been stitching a little bit with a ball pointed needle, And I have to confess that I'm not a fan, and that's mainly because I like to stitch on fine linen. I moved away a little bit more from 32 count, and I stitch primarily on 40 count and higher these days. And with the ballpoint, I find it quite hard to get through. And Noah from Noah Stitches on YouTube, he made an interesting comment about that as well, where he said that if you stitch with it, he said, like, that's all fine, but then when you try to tuck your thread in the back of your stitches, you can really feel that ball tip pulling through those stitches and kind of ripping them, which is really not what you want, because some people say that tucking your thread behind is kind of a bad habit as it changes the tension, but I find that when you have a very fine needle, getting behind those stitches does not really affect the look of the stitching at the front. So yeah, it's a pity that I haven't found a good replacement yet. Anne Glowatsky asks, do you stitch with a hoop or in hand? I used to be basically all in-hand stitcher, and I have recently started more and more, because I work on finer linens, to work on Q-snaps or easy click frames, which I really enjoy. The easy click frames are fantastic, the Q-snaps are great, just super easy to quickly sort of move your stuff around, and yeah, I really enjoy that. When I work on sort of 32 count, 36 count, even sometimes 40 count, if it's a dark thread on light fabric, I will stitch in hand, but for the rest I just put it on a frame. It's just easier. I used to stitch in hoop sometimes, but I find that the hoop affects the fabric too much, and I'm not really enjoying that it can. I've had one instance where I actually ripped the fabric and I had to restore it, which was not great. So yeah, I do prefer the Q-snap over the embroidery hoops. Rain Jude asks, do you know the wonderful Twin Peak ladies? I do indeed. Twin Peak primitives are Nurdan and Nursun Camber, and I met Nurdan a couple of years ago in Italy when we were both at Fili Senza Tempo, which is an amazing fair in the north of Italy. It's really, if you're ever in Italy and they host it, it has been cancelled the last couple of times because of COVID, of course. But I really am excited to, if they want to have me, of course. But if they'll have me, I'll be back again at Fili Senza Tempo. I've really enjoyed meeting all of the wonderful designers there, and then meeting all of the customers that are shopping in Italy, which is really wonderful as well. And yeah, it's just a fantastic fair. So yeah. And I've met Nurdan there, and Nurdan is an absolutely wonderful lady. She's a very generous spirit. She's very kind, and yeah, I really enjoyed hanging out with her. Candy Gordon asks, does your mind go constantly about your next reproduction or creation, and can you get your mind to totally rest and regroup? Well, yes, it's funny that I can switch my mind off. I can sort of decide like, okay, I'm going to work now, but the problem is a lot of the times inspiration comes at really annoying times, which tends to be 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock at night, when you wake up and you really want to sleep, and you get all these amazing ideas and you write them down, and then half the time the next day they're actually garbage. But yeah, that moment when you sort of wake up in the middle of the night and you have an amazing idea that you think like, oh my god, this is groundbreaking and this is the best thing in cross stitch, and it often turns not to be that. I think it's one of those weird sort of slightly bizarre things that your night brain tends to tell you that things are like genius while they're not. But in general, I have had a very, very few good ideas just before bed, and then I tend to have a very bad night of sleep because I'm so excited, and at various points I actually just booted up my computer and sat down and just made the pattern like at 12 o'clock at night to just get it out there. But yes, it's difficult sometimes to then sort of bring your brain back to rest. Frida asks, how do you separate work stitching from hobby stitching, or are they one and the same? Well, yeah, they are kind of the same thing for me, because I only design what I want to stitch. I probably should be a bit more cunning and just make all of the patterns that I could think of, but it doesn't work for me, and I think you could probably sense that as well if I started to sort of produce what I might think is a commercial pattern. I don't think it would work. So for me, it is more of a, do I want to stitch this? What would I like to stitch? That's the patterns that I design, and it kind of reflects in my shop really what I want to stitch. So that's my taste in stitching. And so for me, my hobby stitching is really my work stitching as well. Kate Scrimger asks me, where did you get the sewing basket that is on the shelf over your right hand shoulder? Well, right shoulder. Kate actually wrote that correctly. I just wrote it wrong. It is not here, of course, because we're in a different room, but I brought it down. It is this beautiful wooden box, and it's quite nice. It's filled with lots of different little goodies. And I got this beauty at car boot sale in York. I think I paid £12 for it or something like that. I got it very cheaply, and it is a beauty, and I'm very, very happy with it. So when I got it, just gave it a proper cleaning with some soft soap and water, and it's been in service ever since, and I absolutely love it. Claire R. wonders, when are you going to teach us how to dye? No idea. Don't know yet. I am planning on doing a set of tutorials, but I've said that for way too long now, so I'm not making plans. Perhaps next week, who knows? I'll do my best. I'll try and get some tutorials up soon. Jenny M asks, do you have or know of any Latvian or Northern European samplers or designs? I don't know any Latvian designs. I would love to know more about Latvian embroidery. I have a book on Russian embroidery that mentions sort of some of the countries in sort of the Northern European regions. It has some Finnish patterns and some, I think, Estonian, perhaps some Latvian things in there, but they're more sort of shirts and embroidered sheets and things like that. So it's more like workwear and stuff like that. But I don't know of actual samplers. As for Northern European, I know a little bit more about the Scandinavian side of things. I do a lot of research on the web with regards to that, and I do like to go to the Nordiska Museet in Stockholm and go through their drawers and do a lot of research there, and that has really influenced my design as well, especially the designs from Hälsingland in Sweden, which is something that has had a profound impact on my design language. Emma Cross-Stitching asks me, how much of your time is spent designing compared to stitching, and can we meet your husband? Well, the latter, no. I've asked him. He's not enthusiastic in getting in front of the camera, so yeah, sorry about that. I've done my best, Emma. And how much of your time is spent designing compared to stitching? It's a tricky one. I always feel like I'm quite quickly with the design process, but then it depends pattern to pattern. Some patterns really flow really quickly. Some patterns are, I don't want to say a struggle, but sometimes a pattern, you have an idea for it and it doesn't quite sort of crystallize, and then suddenly you're working on something else and something clicks and you go back to the older design. So I wouldn't know how much it compares. One thing that takes up a huge chunk of time, and I really love that, is doing the historical research. So I think that probably takes the biggest chunk of my day, is reading old documents, looking up ancestry of stitches and all these things, so that does take a fair chunk of time. Justin Dowell asks, how do you find these lovely antique samplers? They are nearly always purchased at auction or from auction websites. You have to be very careful with those. If I can give one warning, if a sampler is extremely small, like say 20 by 30 centimeters, and it should be a big design, it's nearly always a print, and often the seller does not realize that they have a print. But for the rest, just look up the name. That's a good one to start. If you see a name and a year on a sampler before you buy it, enter it in Google. If the only hit that you get with that combination is that actual sample on the auction website, it mostly likely is a real one. If it's a reproduction, you will get lots of prints for that one. So that's a good way to check if something is a fake or not. But then again, you have to be careful with these things, because sometimes you have an obscure sort of retro design that looks very old and actually isn't. But yeah, it is through auctions mainly, and I have had only one bad mistake where I purchased a sampler from America that turned out to be a framed print, which was a pity, and that was my own fault because I didn't do my research properly. But for the rest, I've been very, very lucky. Mazep and Stitcher asks, does your partner stitch as well? And what has been your favorite thing to stitch? My partner doesn't stitch. Like I said earlier, he loves gardening. That's really a big thing that he does. He's a very talented author as well, so he writes as well, which is really wonderful. But he does not do any craft things at all. It's not his thing. My favorite thing to stitch has been, well, there's two actually, I should show you. There is this one here, which was last year's Stitch Along. And I'm still really happy with that one. As you can see, it's not ironed because it's still not framed. I was going to do that, but I might actually do that. Today's Thursday. Yeah, I might do that next week if I think about it, because I think it would be quite fun to get that done. The other one, and this is quite funny because I'm actually not religious, but I do love this pattern. And it's partly the memory of me stitching it as well. And it's the Agnus Dei pattern. That's this one here. I'll bring it a bit closer to the camera as well so you can see it properly. So for this design, I worked on this for many years actually, basically because it was for many years tucked away after I had started it. So I've made a good start with, I think, on this side, something like that, some stuff, or maybe on this side, I don't remember it. And I was working on it, I put it away, and then I forgot about it, and then work got in the way really, and I never worked on it again. And then we were traveling for my husband's work through Europe, and I wanted to have a proper project. I didn't want to bring a whole bag of projects. I said, like, I'm going to bring one thing and I'm going to focus on that and try to finish it as much as possible. So for most of the train journeys, I would be stitching this one here. And there is a lot that I really, really like about this sampler because it was stitched with variegated floss, but also the fact that the variegated floss didn't match up. I've got different flosses, so this is more a white floss and this is more a creamy floss, and then this is more white again here. And I don't really care. I think it looks really great because it gives that antique sampler effect nearly, where you have sort of just, you ran out of thread and you would stitch with something different. And I think it has that character really beautifully. So yeah, it's a piece with a lot of character, and it's a piece that's very dear to me. I really love this piece. Yeah, and we've just gotten out of the period of Easter, which is quite interesting. So yeah, but this is the Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, which is has been really one of my favorite ones. Probably also because I nearly finished it during that holiday. I was literally stitching all day long on trains and stuff, and had really wonderful chats with people wondering what I was doing. And so it is all those memories, and then finishing it off when we got home the last couple of days, which was very satisfying. Nitya Viswanath asks me, I know you buy historical pieces. Do you have a favorite? It's really difficult because, like I said, with the designing things, I design what I want to stitch, and I only buy what I really fall in love with. So if I don't fall in love with it, I won't buy it. So in a way, I love really all of my samplers and textile pieces, but there is a couple of them that I do want to share with you. There is this one, which is one of the first samplers I purchased, but it is also a very special sampler as it is an Ackworth one, and it's the Sarah Stores sampler. Now, those of you who actually purchased this might not recognize this immediately as the Sarah Stores sampler, because Sarah stitched her sampler and she did not finish it for unknown reasons. But all of these medallions, except for this weird honeycomb thing, which I have no idea, I've never seen it on an antique sampler before. If you have, I would love to hear from you if you have seen this on a sampler. I've seen something a little bit similar to it, but it was quite different from this one. But it is not an element that I've seen, and I didn't know how to sort of adapt that to fit it in with the rest of the sampler. But what I did was I used all of these medallions, regrouped them, used Sarah's name, and used the medallion that has the year 1795, and I used them. So it's a fairly early Ackworth sampler. It's a proper 18th century one. It's colour, which makes it very, very rare, and it is dated and it is named, and we actually know who Sarah was, which is very exciting. So that makes this, even though it doesn't look very exciting perhaps, it is actually a very, very exciting sampler. But yeah, this is one of the samplers that is very, very dear to me. Another sampler that's very dear to me is this one here, which is it's a current stitch along as well, hosted by several really lovely folks and friends of mine, but it is the Joan Sands Hogmanay sampler. So Joan Sands stitched this one in 1839, and she finished it on the 31st December, which is Hogmanay in Scotland. And she stitched her mum and dad and her siblings and her family members. And Joan is an enigma, as we know very little about her, which is fascinating because I know so much about the other family members, but nothing about little Joan. But I do know that she stitched a really beautiful sampler with fantastic colours. It's a very cheerful sampler, I think. I stitched mine on 40 count, which is considerably smaller, as you can see. It's like nearly half the size, and that's this little one here. And I so enjoyed stitching this one. It was so much fun because it's not too big of a commitment. It's a very small one that you could sort of stitch in between projects and still get a really, as Laura and Brenda say, a perfect sampler. It has the house, it has the little tree, it has the little enormous flower, which I just love. It has the alphabets and the names, and then of course the signature, and a gorgeous border. I mean, what more do you want? There is one sampler that I cannot share with you, which I am super, super excited about. But it is the mystery sampler that Caroline and Leo and Roxy Yarns and myself will be sharing with you in the not too distant future. The idea is to launch this for like a stitch along type thing for Sampler September, and I asked Caroline if she would be up for that, and she was up for it, and I said, like, do you think Leo and Roxy could dye the yarn and the linen? And they were up for that as well. So it's a unique collaboration. You get the linen and the printed booklet and the beautiful exclusively dyed for this project yarns from Leo and Roxy, and you can get all of them on evertote.com. The link is in below here as well for you. I put a little teaser image in the previous video, and some people were not sure about the colors, but I can reassure you that those are not the colors that I have picked. The sampler was so tremendously faded, and she used such bland colors on her original sampler. She used some really pretty colors as well, but I sort of used the pretty colors as a starting point. So there is a really beautiful, I don't want to say teal, but it is like a blue greeny color. There's some green in it, there's some beautiful sort of ochre tones as well, and some light tones, but you'll just have to see it. It will be really exciting, and I can't wait to share that with you. But yes, you can get those kits from Caroline of the Grids Needle Arts on Flosstube and epitote.com. That's what her shop is. And she will be talking more about that in her lovely Flosstubes as well. The last textile piece that I want to share with you is a piece that is not a sampler, but it is the oldest piece in my collection, and it is spectacular. It is this piece here. Now, this is a woven piece, but it is actually between 15 and 1200 years old. So it is about from the period 500 AD to 800 AD. It's very hard to pinpoint exactly, but it is from Egypt, and it is a Coptic piece of textile. This is a much more recent, I would say 19th century, but it could even be 20th century as well. But it is extremely sort of haggard looking. It looks like it is an ancient piece as well. But basically the Coptic piece here was sewn onto this linen, which is a good thing because linen is quite a non-bacterial material, so it's quite friendly and it's non-acidic in the sense that it won't harm the Coptic piece, and the colouring I think matches greatly. What I will do is I will try and find a way of framing this in such a way that I can display it when I want to, but most of the time it will be kept in an environment away from direct sunlight, because it has been beautiful and red and ochre for, well, at least 1200 years, and I would like it to remain so beautiful as it is right now for at least a couple of more 100 years old. So yeah, but that's this piece. I will cover it back up very carefully now again. But that's a piece that's very dear to me. I purchased this at auction, and it came in a ghastly little metal frame, which was very inappropriate, and it was actually, had it remained in that, it would have damaged the stitching. So I decided to take it out of that one and yeah, keep it neatly. I've had a couple of questions about the studio. There was quite a few people that wanted to see my studio, but I thought I would dedicate a special episode to that one, to sort of give you a studio tour and talk about the objects in my studio a little bit with you, and share a little bit about the pottery and my collecting of that as well. For now, I've got one question left, which is by Darcy Cameron, and he asks, do you ever wish you had the time to stitch things that aren't your own designs? That might be an obvious you betcha. I guess another way to say is, do you feel obliged to stitch your own stuff, or do you always genuinely enjoy it, or both? Well, Darcy, duh. No, I'm just kidding. It is... if you haven't seen Darcy, by the way, do check out his YouTube. I'll link to that below as well. Though it's a very good question. I wish I had the time to stitch everything, honestly. I only stitched Park Hopperbart's a lovely Debussy piece, which he released a little while ago. And the only reason was that I could stitch it in literally a day, which was a nice one for me, and just take off from my usual designing stuff. So that was really nice to be able to work on something slightly different. But I find that, like I said earlier as well, I really like to design what I like to stitch. So it's not like a punishment for me to have to design my own, have to stitch my own designs. But I really wish that there was more time in the day so I could stitch more stuff. With that last question, I want to close off this Q&A as well for now. If you have any other questions, do put them in the link below, and who knows, we might do this again sometime in the future. For now, I just want to thank you for staying for such a tremendously long time with me. I think it has become feature film length. I do hope you liked it. If you did like it, do give it a little thumbs up. And if you subscribe to my channel, make sure to hit that bell as well, so you will get a nice notification the next time there is a video out that I've released. For now, I do want to say stay safe, stay well, hang in there. It's sort of, we're getting, I hope, a bit closer to the end of the COVID era. So yeah, stay safe, keep stitching, take care of yourselves and other ones, and see you soon again. Bye.